The story of a dynasty that would shape France for centuries begins not with a bang, but with a quiet rise. In the intricate tapestry of medieval France, one noble family, the Bourbons, patiently wove their way through alliances, inheritances, and the complex loyalties of feudal life. Their ascent was slow, almost imperceptible, until history itself called them to the forefront. By the late 16th century, France was a nation exhausted, torn apart by the long and brutal wars of religion between Catholics and Protestants. It was in this climate of weary desperation that a distant Bourbon relative, Henry of Navarre, a pragmatic and charismatic leader, ascended to the throne as King Henry IV. His reign was like a gentle dawn after a long, violent night. To unite his fractured kingdom, he famously converted to Catholicism, declaring that Paris is worth a mass. He wasn't a king of grand conquests, but of quiet reconstruction. He focused on rebuilding fields, repairing roads, and restoring the simple, daily rhythms of life that the wars had shattered. Henry IV's steady hand laid the foundations for a dynasty that would endure, in one form or another, for nearly 2.5 centuries. But his era of peace was cut short by an assassin's blade. His young son, Louis XIII, inherited a kingdom still finding its footing. The true architect of power during this time was not the king, but his chief minister, the brilliant and ruthless Cardinal Richelieu. Richelieu's life mission was to forge a strong, centralized French state. He systematically dismantled the power of the great nobles, curbed the independence of regional governors, and consolidated authority in the hands of the monarch. Under his astute guidance, France began its transformation into a modern state, and the Bourbon monarchy grew stronger, preparing the stage for the most spectacular reign in its history. When Louis XIII died, his son, Louis XIV, was just a small child. The kingdom was entrusted to his mother, Anne of Austria, and Richelieu's successor, Cardinal Mazarin. Their regency was immediately tested by a series of rebellions known as the Fronde. These uprisings, led by nobles and Parisians resentful of royal power, left a permanent scar on the young king. Louis XIV witnessed chaos, betrayal, and the humiliation of the royal family being forced to flee Paris. These memories forged in him an unshakable conviction: the king's authority must be absolute, unquestionable, and total. When Mazarin died and Louis XIV finally took the reins of power, he did so with a singular, iron-willed determination. His reign would become the very definition of absolute monarchy. He became the Sun King, the living embodiment of the state. To manifest his power, he transformed a humble hunting lodge into the most breathtaking palace in Europe, Versailles. Versailles was more than just a home. It was a masterpiece of political theater. Its opulent halls and sprawling gardens were designed to awe and intimidate, but also to serve a crucial purpose: to domesticate the nobility. By requiring them to attend his elaborate court, Louis kept them close, trapped in a golden cage of ritual and etiquette, dependent on his favor for their status and wealth. The Sun King's long reign was a golden age for French culture. Art, science, and literature flourished under his patronage. French influence spread across Europe. But this splendor came at a tremendous cost. Decades of relentless warfare drained the treasury, and the tax burden on the common people grew heavier and heavier. Imagine, in the quiet of the night, the slow construction of Versailles. Picture the rhythmic procession of courtiers, the whisper of silk through vast, gilded corridors, and the faint sound of music drifting from a distant ballroom. It is in these quiet moments that we can feel the pulse of the Sun King's world, a world of unparalleled magnificence and deep, hidden tensions. Louis XIV outlived his son and his grandson, a personal tragedy that had profound political consequences. The crown eventually passed to his 5-year-old great-grandson, Louis XV. During his long reign, France remained the cultural heart of Europe. This was the age of enlightenment, of sophisticated salons, brilliant philosophers like Voltaire and Rousseau, and exquisite Rococo art. But beneath this shimmering surface, the foundations of the monarchy were cracking. The disastrous 7 Years' War bled the treasury dry. The tax system remained profoundly unfair, exempting the clergy and nobility, while crushing the peasantry and the rising middle class. Louis XV's own reputation did little to help. His scandalous private life and perceived indifference to the struggles of his people eroded the mystique and respect the crown once commanded. By the time he died, a growing sense of disillusionment had taken hold. He left his grandson, Louis XVI, a kingdom that was a paradox, culturally brilliant and intellectually vibrant, yet financially bankrupt and socially explosive. Louis XVI was a man of gentle and kind disposition. He was well-meaning, deeply religious, and had a genuine interest in science and mechanics, famously practicing the craft of locksmithing. But these personal virtues were no match for the storm that was gathering. He was not the decisive leader France needed to navigate a crisis of this magnitude. The American Revolution, which France enthusiastically supported, brought ideas of liberty and republicanism flooding back across the Atlantic, all while pushing the French state even deeper into debt. As bread shortages, soaring prices, and popular anger intensified, the cry for reform became deafening. In 1789, desperate for a solution, Louis XVI convened the Estates General, an ancient assembly that had not met in 175 years. It was a fateful decision. Instead of solving the financial crisis, it uncorked centuries of pent-up grievances and lit the fuse of the French Revolution. Events moved with breathtaking speed. The storming of the Bastille, the abolition of feudalism, the declaration of the rights of man and of the citizen. Each step dismantled the old world, stripping power from the king. Louis XVI wavered. He tried to cooperate, then hesitated, then attempted a disastrous flight from Paris. Each move only deepened the suspicion and hostility towards him. The monarchy's authority evaporated. In January 1793, the final, tragic act played out. Louis XVI was executed by guillotine, and the Bourbon monarchy, after 2 centuries of rule, was swept away by the revolutionary tide. The years that followed were a whirlwind of change, from a radical republic to the reign of terror, and then to the rise of an emperor, Napoleon Bonaparte. But history has a way of circling back on itself. After Napoleon's final defeat at Waterloo, the great powers of Europe decided to restore the old order. The Bourbons returned to France. Louis XVIII, the brother of the executed Louis XVI, ascended the throne. But he did not return as an absolute monarch. He was a constitutional king, ruling under a charter that recognized many of the changes brought by the revolution. His reign was a delicate balancing act, trying to reconcile the old world of royal tradition with the new realities of parliamentary politics. He navigated between ultra-royalists who wanted to turn back the clock and liberals who demanded more freedom, managing to keep a fragile peace. When he died, his younger brother, Charles X, took the throne. Charles was a true believer in the old ways. He dreamed of restoring the full power and prestige of the pre-revolutionary monarchy. He strengthened the church's role in education and passed laws that seemed to favor the old aristocracy. These actions were a direct challenge to the new France. In July 1830, his attempt to impose restrictive new laws ignited a revolution. The barricades went up once more in the streets of Paris. Charles X fled into exile, the last of the senior Bourbon line to rule France. But the story had one final, brief chapter. The monarchy wasn't abolished, but passed to a different branch of the family. Louis Philippe, from the House of Orleans, became king. He styled himself the citizen king, walking the streets of Paris with an umbrella, projecting an image of middle-class modesty. His reign was another attempt to blend monarchy with modernity. But economic crises and growing demands for wider democracy eroded his support. In 1848, another revolution swept him from power, and with him, the last vestige of Bourbon rule in France came to a quiet and irreversible end. For centuries, the Bourbons had defined the destiny of a nation. Their legacy is etched into the stone of Versailles, captured in the portraits hanging in the Louvre, and woven into the very fabric of French culture and law. Reflecting on their long story is like watching a slow tide move across generations. We see the hopeful pragmatism of Henry IV, the steely state building of Richelieu, the dazzling but costly splendor of the Sun King, the fragile elegance of Louis XV, the tragic failure of Louis XVI, and the faint final echo of the Restoration. These figures, once the center of the world, now drift like silhouettes through the pages of history. Their footsteps fade as France moves on, forging new identities as a republic. The Bourbon Dynasty remains a symbol of a vanished world, its grandeur, its rituals, its power, and its eventual, inevitable unraveling. It's a long, winding narrative that, like a lullaby from a distant age, invites the mind to drift, carrying us back through time, until the echoes of royal courts and fallen kings fade into the quiet of the night. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this journey through history, please like, subscribe, and join us for our next story.